That year, in order to save her, he rushed into the sudden sea of fire without hesitation. In just a few seconds, Kwame Jalo, a high-spirited, sunny and confident young man, turned into a monster that was feared and hated by others. Kwame once had an enviable face and dreamed of spending his life with her. And she, Zanira M'kali, is the brightest new star in the field of plastic surgery in Nigeria. She is beautiful, young, and radiant, and all media are vying to report her story. Zanira goes, fans follow her. Every time she appears, she triggers a wave of enthusiasm. But no one knew that behind that bright and beautiful appearance, standing was Kwame, a man whose face was robbed by the fire, covered with scars, and almost unbearable to look at. Zanira out from under the collapsed ceiling during the fire. The most ironic thing is Zanira's promise at the time. I want to study medicine to cure your face. Kwame was speechless at that time. He just felt like he was being pushed into the abyss of hope. But many years later, a reporter asked Zanira, "What kind of man do you like?" Zanira gave that familiar yet strange smile and said, "Of course it's the good-looking ones." Zanira is a famous plastic surgeon throughout Nigeria. She is young and extremely talented, and many celebrities and wealthy people are vying for her surgery appointment. Zanira never fails in his cases, and every face he carves out is as flawless as a work of art. So it's not surprising that Zanira likes good-looking things. It even sounds natural. At this time, Kwame Jalo was sitting on the sofa in his apartment, staring blankly at the TV screen, but his hand unconsciously touched the half of his face that was engulfed by flames. The burned skin was tense and twisted, as if forever frozen in the moment of pain, so ugly that even he didn't want to look at it anymore. Zanira to no longer love someone like him. The sound of the door opening was heard, and Zanira just returned home and saw the interview being broadcast on TV. Zanira's brows immediately frowned. "What are you looking at this for?" Kwame's voice was low, a little flattering and cautious. "I just want to care about you a little more." In fact, Kwame didn't know when this interview was recorded. Zanira had never told him about it. He just happened to meet her today. Kwame looked at his wife in front of him with a little bit of desire in his eyes, as if he still wanted to give their relationship a chance. They had been married for 5 years, from childhood acquaintance to love and marriage, a total of 14 years of relationship. How could it end like this? Kwame gently held her hand and carefully turned the half of her face that was still intact. "Zanira, help me with the surgery." Kwame still remembers that year when Zanira held her textbook and vowed that when she returned from school, she would personally repair his face. But now Zanira has performed one surgery after another and has almost become a legendary figure, but Kwame still hasn't been able to wait for her to fulfill her promise. Kwame didn't expect that Zanira would impatiently pull his hand back and said coldly, "Let's talk about it later." At that moment, some of Kwame's expectations were completely shattered. Kwame suddenly understood a lot of things. In fact, from the moment Zanira started to perform the surgery independently 3 years ago, she was fully capable of helping him restore his appearance. But Zanira has not taken any action, and even to this day, no one outside knows that they are husband and wife. Zanira maintained her public image as a single, handsome doctor and never mentioned Kwame in any media interviews. With all these things, what else did Kwame not understand? He had long been hidden in a corner by Zanira, and even completely abandoned by her. Kwame gritted his teeth, suppressed the rolling pain, raised his head, and smiled. That smile was as easy as saying, "Zanira, let's go to dinner." But Kwame said, "Zanira, let's get a divorce." Kwame's tone was so light, as if he was talking about an everyday, trivial matter, which made Zanira stunned. Zanira looked up at Kwame, frowning. Her eyes seemed to have seen something dirty. "Kwame, what are you doing?" Kwame suddenly found it funny and raised his lips, but he couldn't hold back his sobs. In Zanira's eyes, every word he said seriously seemed like a joke. Maybe in Zanira's eyes, Kwame is no longer worth taking seriously. But Kwame didn't explain, because there was no need. He just said his goodbyes as gently as possible. At least it was a decent ending. Kwame looked around the house where they had lived for 5 years, and some items were no longer clearly identified. Kwame said softly, "I'll leave the house and everything to you. We don't have any children, so find some time to get the divorce certificate." After saying that, Kwame suddenly felt relieved. It turned out that separation was not that complicated. Zanira suddenly sneered, as if she had grasped something. "Are you angry because I refused to have a child?" Kwame was silent. Half a month ago, he had proposed that he wanted to have a child. After all, they were not young anymore, and it was time. But Zanira's answer that day still makes Kwame feel heartbroken. Zanira said coldly, "Look at how horrible you look. You also want a child? Aren't you afraid that the child will be scared and cry after seeing you? Aren't you afraid that he will feel inferior in the future? Are you worthy?" That night, Zanira's words were like knives, cutting into Kwame's heart. For the next half-month, Zanira looked at Kwame with no warmth in his eyes, as if he had really done something wrong. Today, Zanira's words were even more vicious. Kwame, you are so lucky to marry you, and you still want to have a child? You said you wanted a divorce after rejecting me once. Do you think you are still a teenager? You are so childish. Look at yourself now. Are you qualified to be a father? I am tired enough from work every day. Are you annoyed? Kwame looks at Zanira M'kali's face was full of anger, but he didn't say a word in response. The girl who had whispered and kissed his wounds and promised to accompany him forever seemed to have disappeared. Whether this aggressive woman in front of him was the same Zanira who loved Kwame so deeply back then. Kwame felt an indescribable bitterness and depression in his heart. Kwame actually always wanted to tell Zanira that although he didn't go to work because of the facial injury, he could still support his family by writing. The monthly royalties were stable, and the income was not low. Over the years, the family's daily expenses have all been supported by Kwame's royalties in Victoria County, and even the mortgage has been paid off in advance. But Zanira never cared about these things, or rather, she didn't care at all. Since Zanira never cared about Kwame's efforts, he didn't intend to explain anything. Zanira, whether you believe it or not, I have decided to divorce you. Kwame said this in a calm tone, without even a hint of emotion. Kwame picked up his phone and ID card and walked out the door without looking back. Zanira's roar came from behind, harsh and sharp. Don't come back if you leave. I want to see who else would be blind enough to marry an ugly person like you besides me. Yeah. Kwame only responded lightly, but his steps were unusually firm. Yes, even if no one would marry a freak like Kwame, he would not live with someone who humiliated him all day long. Everyone knew that Kwame's face was ruined when he rushed into the fire for Zanira. She shouldn't treat him so cruelly. As soon as Kwame left the apartment, he went straight to the Lagos Plastic Surgery Hospital. He wanted to cure his face. At least, he didn't want to hear the word ugly anymore. 8 years ago, when the sudden fire engulfed the entire apartment, Kwame rushed into the raging flames without hesitation and carried the trapped Zanira out of the fire. They had been dating for 2 months at the time, and Kwame was a senior at Nairobi University. The fire was caused by Zanira's ex-boyfriend Obasign Dower, who turned his love into hatred and had a strong desire for revenge. Kwame originally wanted to break up with Zanira because he didn't want to drag her down. After all, how could he give her happiness when her face was so damaged? But Zanira refused to agree. She cried and said that she never cared about appearance, but only about the heart. She said Kwame was the best person to her, and she was willing to love him for the rest of her life. Later, Zanira successfully completed her graduate studies and they got married. Kwame always believed that the vow of forever was true. But looking back now, Zanira's life seemed to have lasted only 8 years. The results of the plastic surgery hospital were not satisfactory. The young doctor looked at Kwame and sighed with regret. If we had come to treat him when the fire first happened, we might have had a chance. But now, it's been too long. Kwame didn't respond, but a deep bitterness welled up in his heart. The fire 8 years ago completely changed his fate. He was just an ordinary student. How could he afford emergency skin grafting and follow-up surgery? He could only wait until Zanira was able to treat him. But this wait lasted for so many years. Walking out of the hospital, Kwame was thinking with his head down, but unexpectedly he ran into his college classmate, Tabo Kim, at the door. Tabo was visibly stunned, looking at Kwame and blurting out, "Kwame, your face." Kwame Jalo turned his head subconsciously. He had been used to people looking at him strangely over the years. But Tabo suddenly grabbed Kwame and said, "Didn't you have surgery a long time ago? Why is your face still like this?" Kwame looked confused. "When did I have surgery?" Tabo frowned and said hurriedly, "Have you forgotten? After the fire that year, Zanira said he would take you to the hospital for treatment and said he got 500,000 naira from Obasign Dower to repair your burns. Zanira said if she didn't give her the money, she would call the police. Obase gave her the money to settle the matter." "Didn't you use the money?" Kwame froze suddenly, as if he had been hit hard on the head. $500,000? Kwame had never heard Zanira mention it. She had insisted not to report it to the police that year, saying that Obasai had her privacy in his hands. To protect her, he endured it. But now we know that Zanira had negotiated terms with Obasai in private, and as long as he paid 500,000, he could be spared from prison. But the money was clearly taken in Kwame's name, but he saw nothing. If Kwame had received this money, would he be different now? You really don't know? Tabo realized that he had let the cat out of the bag and quickly turned and left. Kwame felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar, with only one thought in his mind. Something was wrong. Everything was wrong. He had to find Zanira to find out. Kwame turned and ran home, his heart pounding and his emotions surging to the extreme. But the moment Kwame opened the door, he was struck by lightning and froze in place. What came into view was Obasine Dower, the man who had ruined his life, and at that moment, he was sitting on the sofa in the living room holding Zanira. "What are you doing?" Kwame Jalo stood at the door in a daze. The two people in front of him made him almost unbelievable. Many images and thoughts flashed through his mind, but he forced these thoughts down. Kwame can't rely on guesswork. He has to listen to Zanira M'kali said it herself, with her own mouth. No matter how ridiculous her story was, he was willing to believe her as long as she was willing to give an explanation. However, Zanira just sneered, and his eyes stabbed at him like a knife. "Didn't you leave? Didn't you say you wanted to divorce me? Why did you come back?" Obasine Dower stood next to Zanira with a creepy smile on his face, as if he was looking at a worthless piece of trash. That kind of undisguised contempt. The same look Obasine had shown 8 years ago when he found out Kwame was dating Zanira. He didn't take Kwame seriously then, and even less so now. Kwame gritted his teeth and stared at Zanira, whispering, "Tell me, what happened? What are you doing?" Zanira crossed her arms and said in a cold tone, "Didn't you want a divorce? You said you wanted to leave, so now I am free. Do I need to report to you what I do?" Kwame didn't say anything. He knew Zanira was right. He was the one who asked for a divorce first, and even though it was only a few hours since he said that, in her mind, it was over between them. Zanira's current attitude is to tell Kwame that you have no right to interfere in my life anymore. Kwame took a deep breath and said in a hoarse voice, "Okay, okay, okay." Kwame knew that he was not here to argue. He had more important things to do. He tried to suppress his anger and said, "Zanira, we need to talk." "Talk? What else is there to talk about? Aren't you determined to get a divorce?" Zanira stared at Kwame, a mocking smile on his face. "Or did you find that no one wanted you after a while, so you came back to beg me? Do you want me to come back now? Don't leave me." Zanira's tone seemed to be questioning, but in fact, she was frighteningly certain. She simply believed that Kwame would be worthless without her, a useless person who no one would want. Kwame didn't respond. Zanira looked at him as if he were looking at a plastic bottle thrown into a trash can, with disdain, impatience, and even a little annoyance. At this time, Obasine smiled and said, "Since you two are still busy, I won't disturb you." He deliberately emphasized the word couple, then pretended to leave, but his face showed an expression of confidence. Kwame's fists clenched and unclenched quietly. This man was the one who pushed him into the abyss, yet he could still leave with a gentlemanly look on his face. This was simply a great irony. After Obasine left, Zanira didn't hide her sarcasm at all. "Kwame, I told you a long time ago that a man like you is not even worthy of the word man. If you can stay here honestly, maybe I'd still be willing to continue living with you. But if you keep causing trouble, don't blame me for turning hostile. Think carefully about what you really want." Kwame was stunned. Such a simple question made him speechless for a moment. Kwame originally thought that as long as they loved each other, they could get by. Kwame worked hard to make Zanira's life better. Even though he once felt that he was not worthy of her, he really tried his best not to be a burden to her. But now, love has been shattered. What else can Kwame want? Kwame said in a deep voice, "I just want the truth. Zanira, 8 years ago, did you take $500,000 from Obasine?" Zanira's expression changed instantly. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Kwame shook his head, a trace of fatigue flashing in his eyes. "A lot of people know about this. You can't hide it from me." It was Tabo Kim who told Kwame the details, and from then on, he pieced together the whole picture of that year. At that time, Obasine did such a thing. If Kwame reported the case, Obasine would definitely go to jail. And in order to gain the upper hand in public opinion and to stand up for Kwame, Zanira went to Obasine to ask for money. She did not avoid people. Many of their mutual friends knew about this, but most of them were from Obasine and Zanira's side, so naturally no one told Kwame. Zanira said at the time that he took the money to treat Kwame's face, and the money should have been paid by Obasine. So everything seemed reasonable, and no one thought there was anything wrong. However, the money never reached Kwame. If Kwame had really received that $500,000 back then, he would have received plastic surgery and restored his appearance long ago, and he wouldn't have lived like a ghost with a face full of scars for the past 8 years. Zanira M'kali did not deny it. Kwame Jalo felt as if his chest was stabbed by a knife, and he could hardly breathe. Kwame's voice was trembling and angry. "My face can obviously be cured. I asked the doctor. If I had the money for surgery 8 years ago, my face would not be ruined like this today." Kwame approached, his voice low but like thunder. "But what about you? You took the money and used it for yourself. You never told me, and you didn't let me call the police. You said Obasine Dower had leverage over you, and you couldn't break up with him. Fine, I'll put up with it." Kwame smiled bitterly, his eyes full of sadness. I am like a complete fool, suffering such a huge loss. With this face that looks like it crawled out of hell, I hide in a dark corner like a rat in this city called Mbesa, and I dare not even touch the sunlight. But you lied to me, saying that there was something wrong with you. But there was no evidence at all, right? The so-called secret was just the 500,000, right? 500,000. You watched me disfigure myself, watched me live like this, struggle in pain every day, and even felt unworthy of having a child. And you still keep calling me ugly. Don't you feel disgusted when you look at my face? Kwame's voice was choked with sobs, and his emotions were on the verge of collapse. Do you know, who am I in this state for? It's for you, Zanira. 8 years ago, you could have cured me. Later, you became the youngest plastic surgeon in Lagos. You could have helped me, but you did nothing. You just watched me sink into pain every day and stepped on me from time to time. I just filed for divorce and you and that bastard Obesai were cuddling in our house, which was my old home. How long have you been doing this? When did it start? Zanira, have you ever cared about me for even 1 second? Kwame looked at Zanira with eyes that no longer contained anger, only disappointment and sadness. Kwame murmured, I just want to hear you say that this is all a misunderstanding, but you can't even say that. Just when Kwame was about to collapse, Zanira suddenly shouted, Did I beg you? Did I beg you to rush into the fire to save me? I didn't. Zanira's expression was almost distorted. I could have escaped from the fire 8 years ago, but you rushed in and ruined your face. As a result, everyone said that I owed you and that I harmed you. From then on, I was forced to be with you and marry you. My life is tied up by you. It's all your fault. Why do you blame me? Kwame was stunned, and his mind buzzed as if he had been hit on the head with a stick. It turned out that all this, from beginning to end, was a one-man show by him. Kwame grinned dryly, his eyes blank. My 8-year relationship turned out to be just my own wishful thinking? You never wanted to marry me? You wanted to leave me a long time ago? I was just a tool for your revenge back then. Kwame lowered his head and smiled bitterly, his voice already hoarse. You feel wronged, right? You feel that being with a monster like me is bad luck for you. Zanira took a deep breath, as if to burst out the anger that had been buried in his heart for many years. Obesai told me that he lit the fire just to scare me, but you suddenly rushed in to save me. So he lost control and spilled the oil, and the fire burned so fiercely. Zanira yelled, almost tearing her throat. If you hadn't rushed in, he wouldn't have really started the fire. Kwame's mind was buzzing, and his legs went weak, making him almost unable to stand. Zanira continued coldly, I never liked you. At that time, I just had a quarrel with Obesai and got a little upset. You happened to appear beside me and took the initiative to pursue me. I only agreed to your request reluctantly to piss him off. Later, when things got to that point, I regretted it. But I couldn't save face and didn't want others to say that I was an unfaithful woman. So I had to keep dragging it out with you until we got married. Kwame's mind went blank, and he could only hear his heart collapsing bit by bit. It's been 8 years. You've suffered so much, but I always felt that you were the person closest to me. Kwame muttered, his eyes as empty as death. I hurried back today just to ask why. Now it seems that I am the real joke. Kwame laughed softly. Okay. In that case, I'll let you go. We've said everything we need to say. What happened? Whether there was any misunderstanding, it's all clear now. Kwame turned around, not wanting to look at Zanira again, fearing that he would not be able to resist saying something to persuade her to stay. If I had known this would happen, but what could I have done? Kwame walked away step by step, feeling that there was nothing in this world worth staying for anymore. Kwame silently thought to himself that if Zanira really didn't like him 8 years ago, she shouldn't have agreed to his confession. If Zanira had rejected Kwame, he wouldn't have said a word. Kwame really liked Zanira M'kali, but he was not the kind of person who would pester her. If she had clearly rejected him, continuing to pester her would only make him look humble. If everything had developed along this trajectory, perhaps Kwame would not have ruined his face. Zanira and Obesai Dower, after experiencing disputes and turmoil, would still be able to get together smoothly. In Kwame's imagination, everything should be so beautiful. He also admitted that it was he who took the initiative to pursue Zanira, and it was he who stooped to the dust. But she obviously didn't like him, so why did she agree to be together? For 8 years, Kwame invested 8 years of his youth and affection, thinking that they were in love. But the truth cruelly revealed that this relationship was just a dream he directed and acted out. Kwame fled his apartment in downtown Lagos in a panic, looking dazed and with a blank look in his eyes. Before leaving, Kwame only left one sentence to Zanira. See you at the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow morning. Kwame's legs felt weak, as if he was stepping on cotton, and every step was shaky. The impact of reality made it almost impossible for him to distinguish what was real and what was fake. All this was too absurd and too frightening. But what Kwame didn't expect was that he met Obasai Ndar downstairs of the apartment. Kwame didn't want to see this man at all. In his opinion, Obasai was the culprit who put him in this situation. He suddenly realized that he was just a ridiculous tool in the love story between Zanira and Obasai. Kwame ignored the other party and walked forward, but Obasai grabbed his arm. Obasai looked at him and said, "Do you want to know who Zanira really likes?" Kwame's lips curled up into a sneer. "Isn't it you?" "It's not me." Obasai's tone was calm and firm. "You and I are just tools in Zanira's hands. I will take you to see the truth." Kwame didn't know why, but he didn't refuse and followed Obasai. They went to a hospital in Ibadan. In the ward, there was a man who was as thin as a piece of paper. His face was pale, but his facial features were extremely delicate. Even though he looked sick, he was still eye-catching. The first time Kwame saw him, his heart sank and he felt ashamed of himself. Kwame suddenly recalled that Zanira once said in a TV interview that she liked good-looking people. The man on the hospital bed in front of him almost proved her words vividly. Obasai lowered his voice and said slowly, "His name is Elamu Chisomo. He is Zanira's childhood sweetheart. They went to the same secondary school and later entered the University of Abuja together. They were once each other's closest lovers, with deep feelings for each other. However, just when they were happiest, Elamu was suddenly diagnosed with a serious illness. Treatment is very expensive and there is almost no hope. Zanira had no other options, so she approached me to raise money. But I saw through everything later." Obasai smiled bitterly, his voice carrying a hint of bitterness. "No one believed that I was actually Zanira's first love. I really loved her and was even planning to get married. But when I found out the truth, we had already broken up. She turned around and approached you again." Kwame froze, his breath catching. Obasai continued, "I was furious and threatened Zanira, saying I would take revenge. She might have been afraid, so she deliberately stayed with you to try to divert my anger. You were such a fool. Zanira took $500,000 from me, but she didn't spend a cent on you. She used it all to treat Elamu's illness. She even extorted $2 million from my parents, saying it was a wedding gift. But did you see her treat you well with the money?" Obasai sneered, his voice sarcastic. "Later, my parents forced me to study in South Africa, so I temporarily withdrew. But do you think Zanira can live a peaceful life now as if nothing happened? Is it possible?" Hearing this, Kwame froze in place. So, the one Zanira truly loves is Elamu, and Obasai is just a tool she uses to raise money, and Kwame himself is not even a tool, but a substitute. Obasai glanced at Kwame and seemed not to be angry at all with him. Instead, he felt a little pity for him. "Do you know why Zanira chose to marry you? She was afraid that those people would say that she was cold-blooded and heartless, so she wanted to stop them from talking. Zanira also knows that Elamu will never wake up again and will never be with her. But the follow-up treatment will cost money, and she doesn't want to bear the responsibility herself, so she dragged you in to share the burden. And she knew that I might retaliate, so she just put you in front as a shield." Obasai spoke lightly, but every word was like a knife, stabbing into Kwame's heart. Kwame finally realized that the relationship between him and Zanira was just his own wishful thinking from the beginning to the end. They were high school classmates, but they were not close friends at all. In Zanira's eyes, Kwame is just an ordinary person. But Kwame is different. He has liked Zanira for a long time and even applied to the same university for her. Kwame had been silently by Zanira's side, never disturbing her, until she broke up with Obasai, and then he mustered up the courage to confess his love. But just when Kwame was hopeful, Zanira suddenly held his hand and said she was willing to be with him. He was so moved that he didn't know what to do. It turned out that everything was just a trap. Obasai looked at Kwame quietly, and his tone suddenly turned cold. "Now, you know everything. Don't you want to take revenge on Zanira?" Obasai Ndar looked at Kwame Jalo's half-recognizable face with a sarcastic smile on his face. "I ruined your face now, but in the end, the one who really hurt you was not Zanira M'kali." Obasai spoke in a light tone, as if stating a fact that should be taken for granted. "I gave the money to Zanira 8 years ago and asked her to treat your injuries. But what about her? She didn't do it. If she had done it, your face would have been restored long ago. Isn't it her fault that it has become like this now?" Kwame lowered his head and said nothing, the hatred in his heart already boiling over. Obasai smiled coldly. "What do you think we should do?" Kwame's knuckles were tensed, his nails almost digging into his palms. He certainly understood Obasai's thoughts. This man hated Zanira as much. During his 8 years of exile, Obasai had been forced to stay in Johannesburg and could not return home. His hatred for Zanira was no less than his. Zanira's reputation at the largest medical institution in Nigeria is now so high that she has even made headlines on a popular dating variety show, becoming an angel in white in everyone's eyes. But Kwame knew that all this glory was achieved at the expense of the suffering of others. Obesai proposed a plan to hold a press conference and have Kwame reveal his past with Zanira in person. Kwame originally just wanted to walk on in silence, but after learning that Zanira's perfect goddess persona was being sought after by countless people, he could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. Kwame couldn't help but wonder, if these people knew that Zanira was actually a hypocritical and cold-blooded woman, would they still continue to cheer for her? That scene was exciting to think about. On the day of the press conference, Zanira finally learned the news. She frantically called Kwame and sent message after message, begging him to let her go in a choked voice. Obesai, who was standing nearby, looked at Kwame's mobile phone screen flashing with a sneer. "Are you still going to be soft-hearted?" Kwame shook his head calmly. He thought he could forget the past, but now looking back, the root of all this was Zanira, the woman he had tried his best to love. Facing the cameras of countless reporters, Kwame calmly recounted the unbearable past. But at this moment, Obesai's face suddenly changed, and he stretched out his hand to stop Kwame from speaking. But it was too late. Kwame didn't follow Obesai's script. He didn't just say that Zanira had betrayed him and didn't heal his wounds. Kwame told the whole truth. The fire that destroyed his face was started by Obesai, while Zanira chose to remain silent and escape. Kwame never wanted to just expose Zanira's hypocrisy. He also wanted Obesai to pay for the fire. Obesai misjudged Kwame's bottom line, thinking that they could form an alliance over the same victim, but he forgot that he was the arsonist in the fire. After the press conference, Obesai rushed forward angrily and asked Kwame why he wanted to break up with him. Kwame looked at him coldly and said, "This time, I will call the police." Kwame was too stupid to give up his rights because of Zanira's words, "You should be more generous." Now he finally understands that it is never shameful to fight for justice for himself. What's more, Kwame didn't make up anything this time. Everything really happened. If you check, you will find others speaking for him. As soon as Kwame returned to the Seaview Hotel in Lagos where he was staying temporarily, Zanira arrived. Zanira's eyes were red and she looked emotionally broken, staring at Kwame with pain and confusion. Kwame was unusually calm, even indifferent. "Zanira, I'm just asking for what you owe me over the years." But Zanira did not accuse or make excuses as Kwame thought. Zanira just whispered, "Why are you doing this? I really want to live a good life with you." Kwame scoffed, "What about your sweetheart?" Kwame exposed Zanira's secret in one sentence. Zanira was silent for a moment, and finally bit her lip and told the truth. Elamu can no longer be cured, and he will have to lie in bed for the rest of his life. Sooner or later, he will die. She said it lightly, but it was extremely cruel. Kwame suddenly realized that this woman might never have truly loved anyone. Obesai is Zanira's past that she has discarded. Kwame is a tool that has been used to the utmost, and even that sweetheart is just a piece on the chessboard of her life. When that person dies, we can still be together, even if we don't get divorced. Zanira's words became calmer and calmer, as if he took everything for granted. Kwame found it ironic. What was the point of him coming here with such a relationship? Kwame stared at Zanira and said word by word, "All the glory you have now was gained by stepping on my pain. Your false halo is just a step built with my flesh and blood. Now, I will not help you anymore. Are you going to hate me again? Then go ahead and hate me. Remember to get the divorce certificate, by the way." Zanira choked up and hugged Kwame. "No, I love you, Kwame, I mean it." Kwame smiled. 8 years ago, Zanira didn't love him when he was disfigured. After 8 years of marriage, he treated her wholeheartedly, but she still didn't love him. Now, when he finally let go and was about to turn around and leave, she suddenly said she loved him. Zanira M'kali ignored the sarcasm in Kwame Jalo's tone. She just held him tightly and whispered what was in her heart. Zanira confessed that she really only loved one other person at first, so she approached Kwame with a purpose from the beginning. But when his face was disfigured for her, the heavy price shattered her calculations. When Kwame was nice to her, Zanira's heart began to waver. She said that she really fell in love with him. But the more Zanira loved Kwame, the more she couldn't face him. Every time she saw his face, which was badly burned in the fire, her mind would flash back to her past cruel and ruthless actions. The guilt consumed her like wildfire, burning more and more fiercely. Zanira said that she could not bear the guilt, so she repeatedly hurt Kwame with sharp and vicious words. In fact, she did not want to hurt him, but was too afraid to face the mistake she made. "I really regret this, Kwame," Zanira cried, his shirt soaked with tears. "I've always wanted to heal your face and restore your original look." Zanira choked up and continued, "But I can't do it. Your face can't be restored. Every time I see it, I feel like I'm being punished by reality, and it hurts my heart every time. I admit that I love you. I always have. Kwame gritted his teeth and pushed Zanira away. He was tired of these erratic words, tired of her, like, always coming after hurt. What's the point of your liking? Kwame's eyes were as cold as a knife. Does what you say make sense? Kwame's tone stung like a knife. Zanira, let's end it. You destroyed me, and I destroyed you. We are even. But Kwame knew very well that this was not a real even. At most, he had ruined Zanira's reputation and prevented her from appearing on Abuja TV as an independent and noble, beautiful doctor. But what about her? Zanira is still the skilled plastic surgeon. She will not lose her job or go hungry. Kwame, however, has a ruined face. The pain, ridicule, and inferiority he has endured for 8 years remain in his life. How can he really be even? How can he? Zanira was unwilling to let go. She hugged Kwame tightly and begged with tears, "Please don't break up with me, okay? Kwame, I really know I was wrong. Please forgive me." Kwame looked at Zanira, feeling a little angry and a little sarcastic. He didn't understand what this woman was thinking. If she was acting, what was she trying to achieve? He had nothing now. What else could she get from him? Did Zanira want to force Kwame to overturn what he said before and clarify for her that she never did anything wrong? It sounds ridiculous, but Zanira is capable of such a thing. But Kwame is no longer willing to cooperate with her performance. He once again pushes her away. Do you still remember? The day I said I wanted a divorce, you were cuddling with Obasign Dower at home. Your so-called love is too cheap. You love so many people. How can I believe that what you said, "I only love you," is true? Zanira explained in a panic. It was a misunderstanding. Obasai was threatening me, and I was scared, so I had to coax him. I don't love him at all. I only love you. Kwame sneered, his tone merciless. Even Obasai doesn't believe your lies. 8 years ago, they might have believed what she said, but now Obasai is no longer the boy who is easily deceived. It was because Obasai told Kwame everything that he finally saw the truth. But Zanira still fantasizes that she can fool everyone if she wants to. She thinks that if she fooled once, she can fool again. If she fooled Kwame once, she can fool him again. If she fooled Obasai once, she can fool him again. But that is just her wishful thinking. Kwame turned around and ignored Zanira. Suddenly, there was only one question echoing in his mind. Why did he fall in love with such a woman in the first place? What was he obsessed with? Was it worth it? At this moment, Kwame understood. He regretted it, really regretted it. And he finally didn't want to waste even a second on Zanira. Kwame slammed Zanira M'kali pushed out, his voice cold and decisive. Zanira, I will never forgive you, not until you die. Zanira was driven out of the door, staggering, looking crazy and embarrassed, with messy hair and lifeless eyes, as if she was about to collapse at any time. But Kwame no longer wanted to care about Zanira and was unwilling to show her even a trace of sympathy. On social media platforms, Zanira has long been the target of public criticism. Some people scolded her for pretending to be single to appear on a dating show, and some people exposed her for pretending to be kind. But in fact, she is a devil in angel's clothing, and even, she is a married woman. Under such overwhelming public opinion, Kwame once thought that Zanira must have a hard time. But he never expected that Zanira would die 3 days later. Zanira was found dead in her apartment in Kaduna, Nigeria, in what police ruled as suicide. Zanira left behind a suicide note addressed to Kwame. Kwame stared at the suicide note for a long time, and finally a sarcastic smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. In the letter, Zanira wrote, her lover had never loved her. It was precisely because he did not love her that she tried so hard to love him. When the man was seriously ill and ruthlessly abandoned by his family, Zanira rushed forward without hesitation, even wanting to treat him at all costs, just to be able to stand in front of him one day and say, "Look, I am the person who loves you the most in this world." Zanira confided in the letter that she had imagined countless times that they would live happily together, but that was ultimately just her wishful thinking. Zanira wrote that she regretted it. She really did. Zanira admitted that she had done too many wrong things in her life, and she only hoped that Kwame would forgive her before she died, but she knew that he would not forgive her. Obasign Dower once truly loved Zanira, but later his love was too deep and turned into hatred. And Kwame himself once loved Zanira so much that he was willing to give up everything for her, even his appearance and future. But the most ironic thing is that the person who didn't love Zanira from the beginning to the end received all her affection. Those who truly loved her ended up with nothing left. Is this fair? Of course it's not fair. Does such a person deserve love? Kwame told himself coldly in his heart, naturally not worthy. They had been married for 5 years, known each other for 14 years, and loved each other for 8 years. But all this ended in this way. Zanira died, and naturally no one could save the life of the person she wanted to save. That person also died in the hospital soon after. But these things no longer mean anything to Kwame. Until one day when he woke up, Kwame was surprised to find that he was not in the familiar bedroom, but in a four-person dormitory at the university. Kwame was lying on the small bed, surrounded by the familiar student atmosphere. Kwame sat up slowly, but his mind was recalling today's date. Today was the day Kwame confessed his love to Zanira for the first time. In the original timeline, starting from today, all nightmares began to come one after another. 2 hours later, Kwame rushed into the out-of-control fire for her and rescued Zanira from the fire, but he himself was severely burned and his face was completely disfigured. It turns out that the starting point of all this tragedy is today. But this time, Kwame will not go to Zanira again. Now that God has given Kwame a chance to start over, he will definitely seize it. However, even though Kwame's decision changed his life, the gears of fate did not stop for Zanira. 2 months later, Kwame heard from others that Zanira was trapped in a sudden arson incident. Although he escaped luckily, his face was severely burned due to the fierce fire, and he was completely disfigured. Public opinion began to surge again. There were rumors that this woman relied on her beauty to cheat people everywhere, not only for money, but also for love. Several rich second generations were fooled by her and were very angry. Obasai, who was deceived by both love and money, was the most extreme. He eventually lost control and set fire to Zanira, trying to completely destroy it. His crazy behavior also landed him in jail. But to Kwame, these are just stories. Stories should have an ending. The bad guys are punished, and he has nothing to do with all this anymore.